Every summer, a machine in the wall quietly changes the air around you. It removes heat, it lowers humidity, it makes a sealed room feel livable. That seems like its obvious purpose, but the first modern air conditioning system was not built for comfort. It was built because wet paper was expanding inside a Brooklyn printing plant, and several colors of ink were no longer meeting in the right places. In 1902, a young engineer named Willis Carrier was given a problem that sounded small: control the moisture in the air, or the printing company would keep producing blurred, misaligned pages. The machine he designed did not begin by cooling people. Cooling was a side effect of controlling humidity. Yet that machine eventually helped fill movie theaters in summer, made glass skyscrapers practical, kept Congress working through Washington heat, and opened the American South and Southwest to a scale of growth that earlier generations could barely imagine. Air conditioning began as a solution for damaged printing. It became one of the technologies that made modern America geographically possible. The story starts in Brooklyn at the Sackett-Wilhelms Lithography and Publishing Company. Lithography depended on precision. A picture might be printed in several passes, with separate plates laying down different colors. Every pass had to line up with the one before it. If the paper changed size between those passes, even slightly, the colors shifted. Edges blurred. Fine details drifted. A process built around exact registration became unreliable. The cause was not bad ink or careless workers. It was moisture. Paper absorbs water from humid air. As its moisture content changes, the paper expands or contracts. The change may be invisible to someone holding a single sheet, but on a multicolor printing press, tiny dimensional shifts become obvious. The problem was present throughout the year. Summer humidity simply made it bad enough to demand attention. Sackett-Wilhelms brought the problem to Buffalo Forge, a company that manufactured heating equipment. At Buffalo Forge, the assignment passed through engineer Ira Timmis and then to engineering manager J. Irvine Lyle. Lyle handed it to a new employee. Willis Carrier was 25 years old. He had grown up as the only child on a farm near Angola, New York, earned what is often described as a master's degree in electrical engineering from Cornell in 1901, and had recently taken a job at Buffalo Forge for about $10 a week. He was not yet the famous inventor from corporate histories. He was a young engineer in an experimental department, working on a problem somebody else had brought through the door. On July 17, 1902, Carrier designed a system that could regulate the moisture in the air. It used coils and water sprays to bring humidity down to a controlled level, regardless of the weather outside. The result was more than a dehumidifier. By controlling temperature and moisture together, Carrier created a repeatable indoor atmosphere. But the mission was still the paper. The system was later described in a patent as an apparatus for treating air. The patent was filed in 1904 and granted on January 2, 1906 as U.S. Patent 808897. By then, the equipment had already been operating commercially for 2 years. The popular story says Carrier invented air conditioning to cool people. The record points somewhere less dramatic and much stranger. He was trying to stop paper from changing shape. There is another problem with the familiar version of the story. Carrier did not invent every form of air conditioning, and he did not even invent the phrase air conditioning. Before Carrier's Brooklyn installation, engineers were already experimenting with cooling occupied spaces. Alfred Wolff, an engineer associated with Hoboken, New Jersey, had been designing systems for buildings since at least 1899. His work included the New York Stock Exchange. The current exchange building at 11 Wall Street opened in 1903 with a central cooling and heating system intended to make the environment more tolerable for people. That was a different goal from Carrier's. Wolff was working toward human comfort. Carrier was working toward industrial consistency. Then, in 1906, a textile engineer named Stuart W. Cramer used the phrase air conditioning during a speech in Asheville, North Carolina on May 17th. Cramer worked with textile mills, where humidity affected yarn. Dry air could make fibers brittle and increase static electricity. His equipment added moisture to the air. Carrier removed moisture. Cramer added it. They were solving opposite humidity problems, but Cramer's wording captured a broader idea. Air could be treated for a purpose. It could be adjusted, controlled, and made suitable for a process. That concept mattered because it moved the discussion away from simple cooling. Air conditioning was not originally a promise that a room would feel pleasant. It was a manufacturing term. The air was being conditioned for paper, for yarn, for machinery, for production. The comfort industry came later. That distinction also changes the role of Carrier. His achievement was not the invention of the human desire to escape heat. People had been trying to do that for centuries with fans, ice, ventilation, and architectural design. Carrier's breakthrough was the mathematical and mechanical control of air. He made indoor conditions stable enough for industry to depend on them. In 1911, he presented his rational psychrometric formula to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. The formulas gave engineers a way to calculate relationships among temperature, humidity, and air treatment. That sounds dry. But it gave the new technology a language. Once air could be measured and controlled, factories could be designed around it. Carrier remained inside Buffalo Forge for years. He founded the Carrier Engineering Corporation only in 1915, 13 years after the Brooklyn system. Buffalo Forge had created the Carrier Air Conditioner Company of America as a subsidiary in 1908, with Carrier as vice president. The machine was still industrial equipment. Then it entered a place where nobody was buying it to protect paper or yarn. On May 30th, 1925, the Rivoli Theater in Times Square installed an air conditioning system. The setting was perfect. The theater was enormous, crowded, and enclosed. In summer, audiences had every reason to stay away. Heat made the seats uncomfortable, the air stale, and the entire experience less appealing. The system was supposed to change that. It did not go smoothly at first. The equipment had technical problems, and early audiences noticed the machinery as much as the comfort. Carrier regarded the debut as close to a failure, and the theater had to use advertising and demonstrations to convince people that the strange new apparatus was worth experiencing. But the idea survived. The theater did not simply sell a film, it sold a climate. By 1930, more than 300 theaters had installed cooling systems. Many displayed banners that read, "Cooled by refrigeration." Summer had been a weak season for movie theaters. Now it could become one of the best. The modern summer blockbuster has many causes, including studio scheduling, distribution, and marketing. But the theater itself had to become a place where people wanted to spend a hot afternoon. Air conditioning helped make that possible. From there, the technology moved toward private homes. In 1914, the first known residential air conditioning installation was placed in the Charles Gates Mansion in Minneapolis. It was not a compact appliance. The unit was about 20 feet long and 7 feet high. It cost somewhere between $10,000 and $50,000 at the time. In 2026 dollars, that is roughly $300,000 to $1.5 million. It occupied a room of its own. It was expensive, enormous, and impractical for ordinary families. The system could make a mansion more comfortable, but it could not yet create a mass market. The obstacle was not only size or price. Early refrigerants included ammonia, methyl chloride, and sulfur dioxide. These chemicals could be toxic, explosive, or both. Residential air conditioning needed a safer working fluid. In 1928, a team connected to General Motors and its Frigidaire division, including chemist Thomas Midgley Jr., developed Freon, the first widely recognized non-flammable, non-toxic refrigerant of its kind. Midgley's career would later become deeply controversial. He had also helped develop leaded gasoline and chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants, substances that left major environmental consequences. But at the time, Freon solved a practical barrier. It made smaller, safer cooling systems physically possible. The machine that began as a way to keep ink aligned was now becoming a consumer technology. And the next place it changed was not a home. It was the country's built environment. Before air conditioning, architecture had to negotiate with the outside world. Buildings needed windows that opened. Offices needed ventilation. Walls and ceilings had to respond to local weather. In hot climates, a structure that trapped heat could become unusable. The glass office tower created a particular problem. A sealed curtain wall building could be filled with sunlight and people, but without mechanical cooling, it would also become a greenhouse. Air conditioning changed the calculation. By the middle of the 20th century, buildings could be sealed against the outside air and maintained at an artificial temperature. The result was the modern office tower, where climate came from machinery rather than windows, courtyards, porches, or local breezes. Lever House opened in New York in 1952. The Seagram Building followed in 1958. Their glass facades became symbols of corporate modernism. But the visual style depended on an invisible system. Behind the glass was a controlled atmosphere. Workers could sit beneath electric lights, surrounded by sealed windows, while the machines maintained conditions that no natural breeze could provide. Air conditioning did not merely make existing architecture more pleasant. It allowed architects and developers to build structures that earlier generations could not have occupied for long. The same principle reshaped factories. Manufacturing could be moved into regions where heat and humidity had once limited productivity, because the indoor climate could be separated from the outdoor one. It also transformed public institutions. The House of Representatives and the Senate installed air conditioning in the late 1920s, commonly dated to 1928 and 1929. The precise installation records are less clear than the usual retelling suggests, but the broader change is not difficult to see. Washington's summers had long been oppressive. Heat affected work, concentration, and the rhythm of political life. Climate control made it easier for Congress to remain in the Capitol and conduct business through the hot months. A machine first designed to protect printed paper had entered the rooms where national decisions were made. But the largest consequence would unfold far beyond Washington. It would redraw the map. For much of American history, heat placed limits on settlement, construction, and economic growth. The South and Southwest were not empty. Cities such as Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, Miami, Phoenix, and Las Vegas existed long before modern air conditioning. Their growth also depended on forces that had nothing to do with cooling, including defense spending, highways, water infrastructure, lower labor costs, and changing patterns of investment. Air conditioning did not create the Sun Belt by itself. The timing matters. Widespread residential adoption came after Phoenix, and other cities had already begun growing. But air conditioning helped those cities continue growing at a scale that would have been far more difficult without it. It turned extreme heat from a permanent constraint into an engineering problem. Once homes, offices, factories, schools, hospitals, and shopping centers could operate indoors, the climate no longer had the same power to decide where people could live. Migration accelerated. Businesses followed workers. Developers built suburbs across landscapes that had previously demanded different forms of architecture and daily life. The transformation became visible in population statistics. The Sun Belt has accounted for roughly 80% of U.S. population growth over the past decade, and now contains about half of the nation's population. That movement carried political consequences. In July 1969, Kevin Phillips, then a 28-year-old former strategist who had worked on Nixon's 1968 campaign, published The Emerging Republican Majority. He argued that demographic change in the South and West was helping create a durable conservative electoral base. Phillips did not describe air conditioning as the cause of this political realignment. It was not. The realignment had multiple causes, including civil rights politics, party strategy, economic change, and migration. But air conditioning was part of the infrastructure that made the demographic shift sustainable. It helped turn hot regions into permanent centers of population and power. That is the scale of the distance from the original problem. Carrier was trying to keep paper from expanding inside a Brooklyn print shop. Decades later, climate control was helping determine where Americans lived, where corporations built headquarters, where Congress worked, and which regions gained political influence. The machine did not announce this future. It arrived quietly, one controlled room at a time. Return to that printing press in Brooklyn. Paper enters the machine. One color is applied, then another. The sheets have to remain stable, or the image falls apart. Willis Carrier was not trying to cool a nation. He was not planning the Sun Belt, the glass skyscraper, the summer movie season, or the modern Washington political calendar. He was solving a narrow industrial problem with a system that could control humidity. The first breakthrough was about paper. The next was about measurement, then refrigeration, then theaters, then homes, then buildings, factories, migration, and power. Air conditioning did not simply make America more comfortable. It made parts of America newly workable, newly profitable, and newly populated. Its greatest consequence was not that people escaped the heat indoors. It was that the heat stopped deciding where modern America could be built. And somewhere beneath every cooled skyscraper, crowded theater, and air-conditioned home, the old printing problem is still echoing through the room. What surprised you most about air conditioning's journey from a printing problem to a force that reshaped America? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoy tracing familiar technologies back to their unexpected beginnings, leave a like and subscribe to The Origin Portal.